Hey folks, this is 11 from Heart of the Cards. I'm going to be doing a quick review of the new Madoka Magica trial deck for Schwarz. This isn't supposed to be a how to play Schwarz or anything like that. I just wanted to go over the deck for people who know how to play and show you why it's good stuff. Alright, without further ado. The deck's a green-blue. It focuses mostly on cheap encore, a lot of really good assist and trigger manipulation, which I'll get to later, which I really think is the focal point of the deck. I'm going to go over each card and why it's good. So let's get this going. First up, you get 4 copies of... Oops, going too far here. 4 copies of Homura Black-Haired Girl. It's a 3K beats. When I say beats, I mean vanilla. It's a card that doesn't have any special abilities. It's a 3K. Next up, we have Madoka Infirmary Officer. You get 2 copies of that. What it is, it's a 25 that for 1, when its climax is in play, you can take a character card out of your clock when it attacks and put it to your hand and then clock the top card of your deck. In effect, it's an on-attack 1 stock for 1 card out of a limited pool of cards. It being a 0 means it has both early game and late game applications. It's not something you do in the beginning of the game, but late game it can really get you the cards you need with a climax card you might already be playing, so it's pretty good. Next up is Madoka of the Blue Sky. You get 2 copies of her. It's a 1055 beats. Again, a pretty typical card. You shouldn't feel too bad about playing vanilla cards in your deck because tech is expensive and you don't have unlimited stock. So sometimes you just need numbers, and vanilla cards are a great way to do numbers. I almost always run a 1-0 in my decks, and so do a lot of tournament winners, so you might want to check it out. Next up is 2 copies of Kaname Madoka. It's the first of 2 level 3s in this trial deck. It's a 3-2, and it's 10k, and it gets plus 1k if you have 3 or more magic characters in play, which you almost always will. The turn it comes into play, all your characters get plus 2k, and as a startup you can pay 1 for this turn to give it plus 2k. Now it doesn't do the -1 soul or the heal 1 clock that most level 3s do, but it makes sure you win the battles the turn that it comes out, and it makes sure no matter how big the opponent has a character, let's say it's a Disgaea 4 ball deck or something with an unstoppable character, you'll definitely be able to pump up to get the hit that you need. Next up is 2 copies of Akemi Homura. It's the other level 3. To note that means there's 2 level 3s of the same color in one deck, which is pretty cool. She's really good. The characters across from her get soul -1, and if you have 4 or less stock, this card gets plus 500, and it gets cheap encore. By cheap encore, I mean you can encore for a character card from your hand as opposed to 3 stock. So as long as you keep your stock low, you can always make sure this card comes back real cheap without having to repay the cost over and over again. Next up is Law of Cycles. It's a 1/1 green event. What it does is when you play it, you search your deck for a magic character, put it in your hand and shuffle. What I'd suggest using this for in the deck is typically you're going to want to use this to get your big characters late game. You can think of it as a 1-cost card that turns into another card that you want. It lets your tech be a lot more consistent. In addition, it will search out the assist card that is a really good snowball effect. The more you have, the better it is, which I'll get to later. Climax card is no longer relying on others. No longer relying on others. You get 2 of them. It is a typical plus 1,000 plus 1 soul. It has a It has a treasure icon, which means when it's triggered, it goes to your hand and the top card of your deck goes to stock. This will always get you a climax card in your hand. Because of this, you're going to want to play your climax cards more readily so you don't get overburdened with them. Because if you get a bunch in your hand and you're forced to deck refresh, then your deck might be, say, a 30-40 card deck, but you'll be missing all the climax cards in your hand, which means it's a lot more likely that you won't be able to cancel damage. That's a real important part of WeiB, is that WeiB isn't about winning battles, it's about winning the game, and canceling damage is a big part of winning the game. Just through deck manipulation, you can win a game with a trial deck no problem against someone who doesn't know what they're doing very well. I mean, if you think of it this way, let's say you have 4 or 5 cards on the stage, and you have maybe 7 or 8 stock, 4 or 5 cards in your stock, or in your clock and level, and then 4 or 5 cards in your hand. That's about 20 cards that isn't in your deck. And if you deck refresh, and none of those cards are a climax card, that means you've got a 30-card deck, or even less, with 8 climax cards in it, which means it's going to be really, really hard for your opponent to hit for big damage. It's a real important part of the game, and it's something that'll really up your play. So, yeah, also, when this card triggers, it's going to take the top card of your deck and put it into stock. You don't get to see that card. So, whenever you play climax cards that give you stock, or cards that trigger treasure, or anything like that, make sure you spend that stock, or your deck is set up to spend that stock. That way you don't accidentally or unknowingly stock a climax card, and then you might not realize you have a bunch of climax in your stock, and then you're deck refreshing into a deck of 4 or 5 climax cards, and that's going to lose you the game. Alright, next up is the Girl from the Dream. This is, by the way, let me just show you to make sure. Yeah, this is, by the way, the climax card that triggers the infirmary officer. Let's go back to that show real quick. Alright. It's a +1 stock, +1 soul climax card. Once again, this will give you 2 stock, but you have to spend that stock if you want to make sure that it's not a climax card. And you get 4 copies of this. Alright, now we'll go to the blue cards. Note, these are all the cards that are going to be reprinted in the boosters coming out near the end of this month. We'll go into the trial deck only cards, which I think are the real stars of the show, shortly. Alright, we have SHAKY CAM ENGAGE. He's a 0025, and when he attacks, you can check the top card of your deck. This is going to be before the trigger, remember. You check the top card of your deck, and you can put it to the bottom of the deck if you want. This will let you, let's say you're swinging for tons of soul, this will let you get rid of a soul trigger or a double soul trigger, so you're not swinging for 7 or 8 knowing that that's going to cancel, especially against people who manipulate their deck to have a lot of climax cards in it. In addition, what this can do early game is if you check a climax card and you don't really need it right now, you can put it to the bottom of your deck. And if you put it to the bottom of your deck, you know there's a climax card there later on. So depending on how you draw, unless you shuffle, you know when you're going to cancel your opponent. And then that cancel, because the cancel goes off at the same time as the deck refresh, you can choose to put that cancel either in your discard or before or after the refresh. So if it's a huge hit, you can keep it out to keep all of those cards out of the deck once it refreshes. Or if it's a tiny hit, you can put it in. That way you're getting a climax card into your deck. Next up is childhood friend of Kamijo-kun. Yeah, Sayaka. She's again a 003K. You're going to see a lot of vanilla cards in a trial deck. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not a big fan of vanillas at 0, but again, this is a trial deck, and there's nothing wrong with just a card that comes out free and swings. And then you get 2 of the 1-0 second-year student of Mitakihara Middle School Sayaka, again a 105K. You'll note that a lot, actually there's a bunch of them, you'll note that there's a lot of cheap cards in this deck, as cheap as in low cost, which means you're going to have a lot of stock to do things with later on in the game. That is something you have to choose when you're building your deck, is either you have expensive cards or you have expensive tech. If you have expensive cards, you're going to be playing 2/2s, 1/1s, that sort of thing. If you have expensive tech, you're going to be playing a lot of weaker cards, but they have some really good tech. Next up, you have a Magical Girl of Sword Sayaka. You get 3 of them. You get 4 of them. It is a 1/1 2K backup. That's a lot of backup for a trial deck. It's also a character card, of course, because it's a backup, which means you can pull it using things like Law of Cycles and things like the Infirmary Officer climax combo, and it threatens your opponent. If they know you have a climax card in hand, they're more likely to side swing, more likely to try to attack, doing less damage to you, which makes it more likely for you to win the game. Next up, Ally of Justice Sayaka. You get 4 of these. It is a 2/1 8K that gets plus 1K on your... if you have 3 or more magical characters in play, so it makes it a 9K, which is equivalent to a 2/2. Something to note, though, is that 2/1s generally only have 1 soul, so they only do 1 damage. So don't think of it as huge as a 2/2, but for cheaper, because it's only doing 1 damage per swing. You can fix this a lot with plus soul climaxes and playing climaxes more readily, but the idea of it is it's a 9K that's cheaper than a regular 9K. Next up is 2 copies of There Are Miracles in Magic, which is a 2 soul climaxes. 2 soul climaxes are dangerous things if used incorrectly. If your opponent has a lot of climax cards in their deck, 2 soul climaxes will make you swing for 3, 4, or 5 damage with each swing, which means on top of triggers, you're going to get your stuff canceled. If you swing 3 times and do 5 damage each time and each one's canceled, you've done less than just a single 1-point swing each time. However, 2 souls lets you really turn the game around if you can catch your opponent off guard, or if you see that if you know that they have a lot of climax cards in hand or in discard. Remember that discard's open, so you can check through it, and if they have 8 in there, you can swing for the fences because you know they're not going to cancel it. Alright, now we're going to go to the trial deck only cards. These are some really good stuff, so take a close look. Challenging Walpurgis Knight Homura is a 1045K, and its thing is when it attacks, you can check up to the top 2 cards of your deck, put 1 on top, and put all the rest, put up to 1 on top, and put all the rest into the discard pile. What this lets you do is this lets you not only check to see what's coming up on your attack, but if you build a deck that uses important climax cards, particularly ones with door triggers, you're going to be able to get 2 or 3 chances at this card every time this one swings. That adds up, and that can win you games. If you attack for, say, every time you attack with this card, let's say you play 8 doors, just in case. That's going to be about a 1 in 6 or so chance of hitting a door on an attack. Well, this gets way higher than that because you can look at those cards and choose to play them or not play them. Since the check is before the trigger check. Since the cards check is before the trigger check. So, big fan. Big fan. Next up, you get 1 copy of Sayaka and Kyoko, Same Wish. It is a 2/285 that gets plus 500 on your opponent's turn for every other magic character you have. So, it's going to be, you know, say you have 3 or 4 characters out, it's going to be a 9 or a 10 even. This makes it a wall in that it's a 2-soul, level 2 wall that they're going to have to really push to get past. Otherwise, they're either going to be swinging at it with characters they know that are going to reverse, or they're going to have to side swing against it. So either losing a card out of their hand, or they're losing a card on the field, which means they have to replace it, or they're going to be doing less damage. Next up is 2 copies of Solitary Battle Homura. It is an 002K that if it's the only card out, it gets plus 1 level, plus 1500. It's a really good turn 1 play. And it is a 0 level shift card. What shift is, if you don't know, it's a relatively new tech. It's if this card is in your clock at the end of your clock phase. That's when you tick to draw 2 cards at the beginning of your turn. You can take a card from your hand of the same color and swap it. Which means that if this card is in your clock, you are always going to be able to swap a green card out of your hand to get it to play it. Which means near the end of the game, if you have, say, a plus 2 soul climax or a plus 1 soul climax, but you've got no characters to swing with, by swing I mean attack, by the way, apologies, you're always going to be able to swap this card out. You're losing some power in order to get this ability, but shift can be so powerful. Even though you have less power on your characters, it makes your deck more, what's it called? Standard? What's a good word for it? It makes your deck more reliable in that you're going to have characters to attack with. Next is probably the favorite card of this deck. That Solitary Battle is really, really good. Where is it? This Solitary Battle, I'm a big fan of, especially if you play lots of doors. But this is where it shines. Pardon me, I move all this stuff, is Smiling Sayaka. She's a 1/1, 25K. And she has cheap Encore, but her thing is she's an assist, and the assist is 500 times the number of assist characters. So it by itself is a 500 assist. If you have 2 of them out, they're each 1,000. What makes it so good is that all your zero-cost assists that you bring out early game that are just the plus 500s, if they're up on the front row attacking direct, their assists, even though their assist isn't going off, it still adds plus 500 to these. So if you have, and I'll come right up to it here, is Normal Girl Madoka, which is it's coming up, you get 4 of them. It is a simple characters in front of this get plus 500. If you have a couple of these in the back row, you can push them up to the front and direct swing with them, and each of them is still giving this power. So if you have 2 of them back and 2 of these Sayakas and 2 of these Madokas, you're going to have, each of these is going to be giving you 2k. Now, even if this character is reversed, it's still on the field, so it still gives the bonus to this card. So, at least for that turn, you're going to have huge numbers in the back, and even if you have 2 of them out, you still have huge numbers. It also lets you use these cards as later direct attackers to pump up Sayaka here during your opponent's turn. On top of all of that, it has cheap Encore, so you can get it up front and swing with it, and you can keep it alive relatively cheaply, thereby letting your other Sayakas get the bonus. I'm a big fan of this card. If I were building a deck out of what's currently available with the trial decks, the first thing I would do is get 2 trial decks just to play 4 of this. It's so good. And then you get 4 of this Normal Girl Madoka, which is just a 500 assist. Nothing wrong with that. You should be playing some assist in every deck. And then finally what you get is you get a promo card. This is actually a 50 card deck, so this is your 51st card. It is, I'd say, Challenging Fate, Challenging Destiny. We'll go with Challenging Fate. Challenging Fate Homura. It is an 8k/2/1 that 4/1 as a startup. This turn it gets plus 2k. This is a big deal for a green deck because what it is it's a card that has an unlimited pump on it. It's kind of like a red card for a green deck. This alone can be your mid-game character reverser, and you don't have to leave your color to do it. So you only get 1 of it. It is a promo, but I think it's pretty cool. I think it's a really good swap in the deck. You could swap out, say, 1 of the Ally of Justice Sayaka to put that card in just for, I don't know, just for some offensive capabilities in the mid-game. So yeah, this is the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed these. I'm going to try to do one of these for all of the new decks that come out, and hopefully even talk about boosters. Give it a like if you like this sort of thing. I know the Heart of the Cards channel is mostly Vanguard, but us Weiss players need love too. Alright, thanks. Bye.